Hello and welcome to the Good Growth Podcast. Now, I can bet all of you listening have ordered something online before, and I bet all of you at some point would have liked what you'd ordered a little bit quicker than when you got it. You may even already pay a subscription so you can receive next day delivery orders on demand, Amazon Prime probably being the most well known example. Businesses are well aware of this demand for their products and their services to be delivered to their customers much quicker, but this can come at a cost and hit profit margins. So optimizing the last mile of your product's delivery is now a focus of many retailers and grocers alike. And with me to talk this through as an expert in the digital grocery market, we've got former chief product owner at Waitrose, digital director at Lidl, and now today is one of Good Growth's principal consultants, Alex Murray. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning, Dan. Glad to be here.
Good to have you on. This term, the last mile or last delivery mile, seems to have come about quite recently. What do we mean by that term, last delivery mile? And what is the goal of last mile delivery?
I mean, essentially, we use it now to describe the final sort of customer delivery going from the retailer or the distributor endpoint to a consumer's house, home, work, wherever it's being delivered to. So it's not really the anywhere else in the supply chain. It's literally the last journey that happens as it leaves a retailer and makes its way into the hands of a consumer.
So that's the term, the last mile. Then, more broadly, then, just give us an overview then of what the different types of delivery are usually available in online retail. What would we normally see?
Well, there's historically been fairly limited choice. I think it's helpful just to remind ourselves that once upon a time it was possible, of course, to go to your local shop in the village and order something from the butchers, and they would send it round, on a bike with a lad maybe once a week on a schedule, or you call up and order something, and that was quite normal. And then back in the sort of, I think started in the late 40s, mid 50s, obviously the introduction of in-store shopping that was self-service as opposed to being served at a counter became a concept. And generally people loved this because it saved them time. They could choose stuff. There wasn't a massive queue. So that moved to kind of in-store, effectively the early days of supermarket shopping, was very revolutionary and indeed popular. And then obviously with the advent of the internet, so we're talking here kind of late 90s, and Tesco was probably one of the first, I think, if not the first UK grocer to bring in online shopping back in, I think it was 97. So we then started to get the opportunity to order goods online and have them delivered directly. That would be on a pre-scheduled kind of slot, and of course that is still predominantly very, very common, particularly in the grocery space, to choose a slot in advance, and the delivery will come in a few days. Obviously that timeline then shortened, so we started to get next day deliveries, and we're now in a space where same day delivery is quite feasible in urban areas, and we've now moved through into this sort of rapid delivery market, particularly in highly populated urban areas. And we shouldn't forget click and collect. It's not a delivery option, obviously, but it is still something that is important in the mix because it gives control to the consumer as to when they can get hold of those goods. So it'll be interesting to see how the sort of rapid delivery market impacts click and collect in the mix of options for customers getting what they want. But that's the sort of mix of different types of deliveries. But the pre-shot sort of slot booking option is fine for customers who aren't in a rush, and is still probably the most widely used one. Next day has been on the increase for several years, and there has been this explosion in same day and rapid delivery, particularly since the pandemic.
Yeah, that's the interesting point here. I think the amount of same day delivery options, rapid delivery options that have suddenly started appearing, particularly if you live in one of those urban areas, you'll find that there's perhaps even up to half a dozen to choose from. Why do you think there's been this increase in the number of rapid delivery services? I mean, you mentioned the pandemic. Has the pandemic simply accelerated what was inevitably coming?
I think to some degree, I mean, there's no doubt. Obviously, we saw online deliveries in general, spike during the pandemic rather predictably, and while that sort of slid back a little, I think it has opened up, that online grocery market in particular, and to a wider audience. I think the increase in sort of rapid delivery has been quite a long time coming, to be honest. So, I've certainly come across concepts going back as far as 8 to 10 years of people thinking about this, and the consumer demand definitely wasn't there. And I think the growing options within, particularly within grocery and deliveries, in terms of being able to get next day delivery, was still on the up. So I don't know that it was particularly fertile ground, actually, sort of 8 to 10 years ago. But consumer expectations change, and I think particularly since Amazon introduced, Prime and Prime Now, in particular, that possibility, I suppose, has been seeded within the consumer mindset that this is something that they could access. So I think that those are probably big contributing factors.
Yeah, I suppose they're answering these questions of consumers of what if I could just get this in an hour, or maybe 30 minutes, or maybe 15 minutes. What are some of can you give us a few of those examples that we're seeing now, and what the differences are between perhaps different players in the rapid delivery market, and perhaps how this is differing and shaping by different industries as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's fundamentally, I think there are two key areas that do kind of rapid delivery. The grocery space and the sort of FMCG space is a very big one. So people wanting or getting grocery items, or I should say items readily available from a large grocery store, for example, which does of course include non-food, I don't know, things like batteries, for example. So you've got the kind of food area, and then of course you've got non-food. But the really big players, obviously in non-food around rapid delivery, are really just Amazon and primarily Argos, who offer Argos Fast Track, which is a same day delivery service. So those are the key ones. There are some doing it in fashion. There's not quite as much demand for rapid delivery within the fashion world. But certainly, if you've run out of something, in your home and you need it kind of now, then that demand, I think, is slowly, it's not so much increasing, but the awareness that problem can be solved in a cost-effective manner is becoming more and more apparent to people. So an example was last night, we went to put on the dishwasher and we realized we'd run out of dishwasher tablets. I'm sure it's a very common scenario. So my option was I either have to at 9 o'clock, put on my coat and my shoes and go and find probably a very overpriced dishwasher pack from my local corner shop, or I have to get in the car and go and find a supermarket. But actually, I was able to go onto one of these sort of rapid delivery services and find some dishwasher tablets very easily. Oh, look, there's some other stuff here. Yes, I'll have a bottle of wine. I'll have some crisps. I'll get something for lunch tomorrow. And order it, and it turned up at my house in 13 minutes on a bike. So I wonder whether these sort of services are conceptually, some people think, well, I don't necessarily need this, or I'm not interested in it. But when people try it, they're like, actually, this could be really quite convenient in lots of different scenarios. So yeah, so I think there are different players, there are different industries within the grocery space. Obviously, all the big supermarkets are getting involved and thinking about how they might address this particular customer need. But the real explosion is really in the startup space. And there are lots of completely new players. And there are some existing players, like, for example, Deliveroo and Uber Eats, who already have the infrastructure to do on-demand rapid delivery, who obviously are also in on the game as well. So I think primarily those are the three different players, and it does seem to be mainly in the sort of convenience, food and household item space in terms of product.
It's a staggering concept to think that you talk about your example there. I mean, it's one that we say, yes, of course, this is not too surprising nowadays, but actually say that 5, 10 years ago, and people would think that you're mad, even that you could just click your fingers essentially and have what you need turn up at your door within minutes. You talk about how the perhaps larger organisations, bigger supermarkets, are looking to respond to this rapid delivery service and perhaps provide a service of their own. It's kind of a two-pronged question. Firstly, how can such a large organisation, such as a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's or Lidl's or whoever, who are so well established in their setup and their infrastructure, now compete with these startups who are there just to fulfil a certain need? And the second part to that question is, how much of a threat are they really to their market?
Yes, two very good questions. I think if we take the second one first, how much of a threat are they? I don't think they are short term. The large grocers have a vast proportion of the grocery market. And online sales anyway. Peaked at about 16% of total grocery. Even during the pandemic, I think it slipped back to about 12%. So I don't think there's any sort of immediate sleep that's being lost, but the danger always is that the sort of short-term trends that you see become something much more significant longer term. And where you see a paradigm shift in thinking with consumers, that over time, and as obviously the population ages and people get more comfortable, with technology and certain have differing expectations as they get older, it's often the longer term change that we underestimate and the shorter term change that we overestimate. So I don't think there's any sort of immediate massive commercial threat to the big grocers, but I think all of them have shown through what they're doing. Not all of them, but most of them are at the very least dabbling or partnering in the rapid delivery space. And I think that's a recognition of the fact that you want to have your foot in the door with these kind of changes in consumer behavior, because if they do suddenly take off, or they suddenly do take a large chunk of the market, how quickly can you adapt? How agile can you be in terms of responding to that? So to your first question, I think the grocers have they have opportunities in that they have tend to have a decent funding. They're not sort of VC backed, and they're not looking for to raise funds. They already have established brands. So these startups in the rapid delivery space have to spend a huge amount of money on basically making sure that they're visible, so that their marketing spends are fairly eye-watering, particularly early on. So for the existing grocers, they don't have that problem. They already have channels of communication to their existing customer base and out into the world. On the downside, of course, they've already sunk a lot of investment into their existing infrastructure. So whether that's having their own branded vans or creating their own, sort of very large warehousing systems, there's a lot of money that's gone into building that operating model, and they'll be looking to get obviously value from that. So some of those assets are absolutely reusable or repurposable for thinking about new models, and I think what a lot of the big grocers are exploring, and what a lot of the startups are starting with, is this sort of concept of a micro fulfillment center. So you have a smaller distribution space that you can place somewhere fairly undesirable in terms of a location, because you're not actually having anyone walking past or going into it. So the prices are a bit lower on that, but also the technology and the robotics that you have in that space, is tailored to a sort of smaller footprint. And the startups are doing that sort of from scratch, and the established grocers obviously need to rethink, some of the use of their space. So I think there are pros and cons, I think, for the grocers, but agility and visibility are two key ones for success, overall, whichever side you're on.
You sort of hinted at it there, and I want to come on to the new entrants into the market and the startups from their perspective. Well, I suppose a key aspect for them is stock, surely, because I mean, and I say that because you're ordering off a startup app, you want something specific. You're perhaps only ordering a handful of items. That item needs to be in stock. Whereas, don't get me wrong, you're frustrated when you're big shop, you order online from a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's and something's not in stock, but you've ordered your week shops, for example, so you've ordered 30 other items. So you're less concerned. So how much firstly is that a threat and also a burden on these startups going into the market?
I mean, it's certainly critical. So having accurate inventory and availability, you're right, is make or break. If you're having items that are out of stock, it soon kills the value, of the model overall. I think where we've seen there's been a bit of a development, and where there's still a gap between the startups and the grocers, is that if you are fulfilling orders out of a space that's a shared space that's open to other customers, so say a local convenience store that's open, you can't really guarantee availability, because obviously you've got people taking things off the shelves and taking them to the tills. So the model, I think that most, not all, but most of these startups are approaching is creating effectively their own dark stores where they have full control of and full visibility of their inventory, and they are updating it in real time or near real time. So that is the method by which they can create and guarantee that, that absolute surety around, what the consumers can get. This concept obviously does exist within the larger grocers, so on a huge scale, Ocado does this. They don't operate shops. So again, they've got a big warehouse, they know what's there. And indeed, lots of the other grocers also have dark stores that they operate out of as well. So it is critical, and having things in stock and also not losing time trying to talk to a customer about substitutions or alternatives. It just breaks the commercial model. That conversation will make an order very quickly unprofitable. So it needs to be avoided altogether.
You talked to us about the huge marketing overheads that startups will have in order to establish themselves. How do they structure their cost models? Because, like you said, there's a huge expense there. How can they become sustainable?
Well, there's one main factor and two main levers, essentially. So these models are rarely profitable at the outset, and usually their investors know this. There's a degree to which they have to scale in order to achieve the economy of scale, and find some path to profitability. Growth is very critical early on because you need a critical mass of customers in order to move along that path to profitability and get the scale. So a lot of the early investment is around marketing and visibility to drive volume. That's really important. When it comes to the underlying commercial model, there are two key levers, without wanting to oversimplify it, but essentially there are two key levers that these startups will use. One is that they will have control of and be able to influence the price of the products that are being sold. So effectively, they can add a markup to whatever the price of that product might be. So they can increase the product margin effectively. And the second, of course, is the delivery charge, which obviously offsets some of the cost of delivery and may even bring in a little bit of profit as well. So those are probably your two key kind of levers, and then you add on to that obviously volume and scale. And again, the large grocers have they can't really mark up their own prices, so they're a bit of a disadvantage there. You can get differential pricing in the market, so convenience outlets, so your Tesco Express, your Sainsbury's local, will generally have a higher product price than the large format stores. So it can happen, but the consumers only have sort of so much tolerance there. And then the delivery charges, again, the format of that and the economics of that are quite different, because on the rapid delivery model, you are effectively doing one maybe two, possibly, three deliveries at the same time, but you might only be doing one. So, the cost is just that order. When you're doing, a big bulk delivery in a van that's pre-scheduled, you might be delivering 10, 20, maybe 30 orders all in one, one van and one hit. So, the cost model isn't complicated necessarily, but the big question is, to what degree can it be flexed? So, all of the current rapid grocery players, are charging somewhere between about £1 and £3 as their delivery cost. Some of them might offer free delivery when you get over a threshold, some don't. But if I look back 5-7 years, that delivery cost was nearer £5 to £7 for rapid delivery. And obviously that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're ordering £10 of goods to pay £7 for delivery, you might pay two. You probably would pay one, for the convenience of it. So, I think the operating model has been optimized enough to be able to lower those delivery charges. And this is a really key point in the rapid sort of delivery market getting traction, is that those improvements in micro fulfillment centers and that kind of delivery model being optimized enough that those prices can be kept low enough that customers don't look at the product prices and go, this is a third more than I normally pay, and they don't look at the delivery cost and say it's disproportionate to the value of the order that I'm placing.
So really optimizing your own internal or your own logistics is crucial then in being able to keep your own costs down, and then obviously deliver more appealing price points to the consumer. What about click and collect then? Does that just die out slowly?
I think there's probably always a role for click and collect, although I've never forgotten. Somebody said to me once that click and collect only exists because a fast, convenient, affordable delivery option does not. And I guess fundamentally what's changed is that when you can order a rapid delivery to come to you in 15 to 20 minutes, and you can change the location of where that comes to, it does negate to some degree the need for click and collect, because actually you only order it when you need it. So, one might have had the scenario before where you said, oh, I've placed a click and collect order because I don't know, when I'm going to be in to take a delivery. But nevertheless, you still have to go somewhere to go and collect that order. So, your plans can't change to the degree where you can't go and collect your click and collect. With rapid delivery, because it's pretty much instantaneous, there just isn't that sort of gap between I need something and when I'm going to get it. And so, I do think it makes click and collect less interesting. That said, click and collect is far more common for other verticals, particularly outside of the grocery space. Grocery click and collect is still pretty low compared to other verticals like fashion, for example, where it's much more common. So I think over time, if these increase, then that could be a lessening that we see in the click and collect demand. It is worth saying, however, that the rapid delivery services still only work in urban areas. Both from a commercial, cost perspective, but just practically, you can't very easily do a rapid delivery if you're miles away in the country.
Yeah.
So I think there will always be a role for click and collect. It will remain convenient. How high that demand remains for click and collect in urban areas, I think, will be interesting to monitor.
Yeah, 10-minute delivery in the Outer Hebrides probably not coming just
yet. Probably not coming soon. No.
But you never know. I have a final question, and perhaps puts you on the spot slightly with this one, but what social and behavioural changes do you see this sort of last rapid delivery driving in us?
Well, I think the first thing to observe, and I've seen this with online sort of grocery in general. If you look back, 10 or 15 years, there's always a, dare I say it, a generation of people who say, I don't see the need for it. I don't think it'll ever take off. But quite often that's just because they don't have a need for it themselves. And with every generation and every new every new individual and family um, who essentially use technology in a fresh way, you will always see this sort of type of change occurring. So um, I, I think socially, in terms of the rapidness of delivery, I think it's quite a fundamental human desire to want something and get it quickly. And we could debate whether that's a good or a bad thing, and whether people should be patient and be made to wait for things because it's does it encourage us to buy things we don't need? All of these are quite philosophical questions, but I observe, certainly where I am based, here in Bristol, where there are a lot of students, it's clearly very, very normal behaviour for a certain generation. And I do wonder whether the advent of food delivery in terms of takeaways, which has been in high growth for again at least 5 years, whether again that's driving some fundamental change. It's the idea that you don't have to wait a particularly long time. Again, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, but Netflix, we don't have to wait for DVDs to be delivered through the door. We just switch on our TV and we stream and off we go. Do we pay more in our Netflix subscriptions than we previously spent on blockbuster video cassettes back in the day? Well, probably. Do we like the convenience and are we prepared to pay for it? Yes, we are. So I think in a connected world where people can access things readily, quickly, with minimum inconvenience, I think it's quite a fundamental the human desire. Again, quite what that does to us sort of socially is up to debate, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And of course, technology absolutely is an enabler. To think of something that you need or want and get hold of it, more quickly probably than you've ever been able to do before.
Well, it's certainly not going anywhere, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out in the market over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. Alex, brilliant to get your views and expert insight into this market. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dan.
Cheers.
Bye.